The Arab world is largely associated with Islam, and that's not surprising. Islam became the catalyst for the greatest Arab expansion in history and the creation of perhaps the most powerful empire of its time, the Arab Caliphate. But what was there before Islam? How did the Arab peoples live and what did they believe in? My name is Semyon and welcome to the Amazing History channel, where we tell you about the most interesting moments from the history of the ancient world and the Middle Ages. Subscribe, comment, and like. And now, let's get started with the topic of this episode. Pre-Islamic Arabia was mainly inhabited by nomadic, constantly moving tribes. These Bedouin tribes, some of which have preserved the traditions of nomadic life to this day, played a key role in the political and social structure of the Arabian Peninsula, with constantly shifting alliances, endless wars, and rare instances of organized statehood. Family and kinship groups played an important role in Bedouin culture, and the level of interconnectedness and mutual assistance within the tribe was high. The Bedouins depended on their livestock, which mainly consisted of sheep, goats, and camels, and this livestock provided them not only with meat and milk but also with other resources necessary for survival in the harsh conditions of the desert. Tents were the typical dwelling of the Bedouins, and families lived in close proximity to each other. Tribal chiefs played an important role in ensuring the observance of the unwritten rules of Bedouin society and in resolving disputes within the tribe. Bedouin tribes followed patriarchal customs, where inheritance was passed down through the male line. Women could not inherit property and had almost no rights. They could even become victims in tribal conflicts, where capturing them as spoils of war was a common practice. Bedouin laws allowed men to marry captives, and there was no limit to the number of women a man could marry. When a man died, his son inherited his father's women, except for his own mother, of course. Women in tribal Arabia had almost no say in marriage, as it was often arranged between the man and the family of his future wife, and the family would receive property in exchange for the bride, such as camels or horses. It is important to note that at that time there were cases of newborn girls being killed. The holy book of Muslims, the Quran, mentions that Arabs during the period of ignorance known as Jahiliyyah used to bury their daughters alive. Bedouin men often viewed women as an economic burden and a potential source of shame, since the capture of women by a hostile tribe was considered humiliating in conservative Bedouin society. In the absence of centralized states, with rare exceptions, there were neither written laws, nor courts, nor law enforcement agencies to protect the population in pre-Islamic Arabia. This meant that Bedouin tribes had to provide security and protection for their members themselves. For the killing of a tribe member by another tribe, revenge was expected, which led to almost constant wars and conflicts. Protecting one's tribe and avenging fellow tribesmen was considered a great honor. The harsh living conditions on the Arabian Peninsula further strengthened the tribal system and the sense of identity within the tribe, because often their protection and economic cooperation were the difference between death and survival. The tribes fought with each other, attacked caravans and settled communities, and plundered them, since lawlessness prevailed in most of Arabia. Caravans and settled communities paid tribute to the raiding Bedouin tribes to avoid their attacks. Although most of the tribes of Arabia continued to lead a nomadic lifestyle, some of them managed to gain influence in certain territories and switch to a settled way of life. Mecca was practically ruled by skilled merchants from the Quraysh tribe, who took over the city around the 5th century, and in Yathrib, which was later called Medina, the Arab tribes of the Bedouins and Khazraj dominated, as well as the Jewish tribes of Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Qurayza. While the nomadic Bedouins looked down on settled life and considered city dwellers a nation of shopkeepers, the emergence of cities like Mecca became the main reason for the birth of a common pan-Arab identity in the pre-Islamic period. The cities I mentioned, Mecca and Yathrib, were located in the Hijaz, a region with enough water, which made it a logical choice for a settled way of life in the harsh climate and terrain of Arabia. Mecca was an important trading center in the region, a place where caravans passed through. Goods were brought here from across the Red Sea and from local Bedouin tribes. Then camel caravans delivered them to the Levant. The people of Mecca made agreements with the Byzantine Empire and Bedouin tribes for the safe passage of their trade caravans. Also in Mecca was the Kaaba, a sacred site in Islam, which was also sacred in polytheistic Arabia and housed statues of idols and gods from various Arab tribes. The Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, who lived in the 1st century BC, wrote about an isolated region of Arabia, describing the Kaaba as a very sacred temple that was highly revered by all Arabs. Mecca, where the Kaaba was located, also had important religious significance for the polytheist Arabs. Once a year, Arabs from all over Arabia made a pilgrimage to the Kaaba and drank from the sacred Zamzam well. During this time of year, conflicts would cease, a truce would be declared, disputes and debts would be settled, and trade would take place between different tribes. Thus, Mecca became the center of a fragile confederation of tribes around the city, since visitors were required to observe the rules established in Mecca. The commercial potential of Mecca and its religious significance for the Arabs turned it into a unifying factor and shaped their national identity. Another important city in Arabia was Yathrib, Medina. It was an agricultural center, also located in the fertile region of Hijaz, which allowed the city to become an important transit point for trade caravans traveling along the Red Sea. Initially, Jewish tribes predominated in Yathrib, but gradually several Arab tribes settled there as well, gaining political and economic influence in the city. While the Arabs were mainly engaged in agriculture, the Jews were active as entrepreneurs. The growth of cities inevitably led to an increase in trade, and the growth of trade inevitably led to an increase in usury, which was practiced by both Arabs and Jews. Later, this practice would be prohibited by Islam. We have already seen that even in pre-Islamic Arabia, religion played an important role in shaping a common pan-Arab identity. But what religion did the Arabs follow before the emergence of Islam? Religion in pre-Islamic Arabia was a mixture of polytheism, Christianity, Judaism, and Iranian religions. Arab polytheism or paganism was the most widespread belief system. Each tribe, city, and region could have its own god or idol which served as a kind of patron for that community. Arabs also believed in supernatural beings such as jinn.
Ну, сказку про Аладдина все ж помнят.
Statues of gods and goddesses were placed in the Kaaba, and some scholars claim that Allah also had his own statue in the Kaaba. There are hadiths, the authenticity of which is disputed, claiming that there was also an image of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus in the Kaaba. In total, it is estimated that there were up to 360 such statues and images in the Kaaba. Trade and political relations with the Byzantine Empire, Ethiopia, Persia, and other neighboring states also played a role in shaping the religious landscape of Arabia. As early as the 1st century AD, Arab merchants brought Christianity to Arabia. Others were evangelized under the strong influence of the Byzantine Empire. For example, the Ghassanids, vassal states of Rome, adopted Christianity. In the south of the country, in Najran, a strong Christian community emerged under the influence of the Ethiopian Christian kingdom of Aksum. In some regions of the country, Nestorian Christianity was strong, but the most popular denomination was monophysitism. Judaism also held a significant place in the religious landscape of Arabia. As a result of Roman persecutions, Jewish immigration to Arabia began as early as the 1st century AD. Many Jews found refuge in the cities of Hijaz. Many Arabs also converted to Judaism, as it was often a condition for settling in these very cities where Jews dominated. The Himyarite kingdom of Yemen adopted Judaism in the 4th century, and by the 5th century some members of the Kinda tribe who lived in Central Arabia and were vassals of the Himyarites had also converted to Judaism. Sources also speak of a monotheistic religion based on the worship of the one God of the Abrahamic religions, but apparently not connected to either Christianity or Judaism, and probably centered around the prophecy of Abraham. The followers of this religion were called Hanifs. They rejected the idolatry and paganism of most Arabs, sharing some features with other Abrahamic religions. For example, the prohibition on eating pork. The extent of the spread of Hanifism is unclear, but according to some Islamic sources, the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, and some of his future companions belonged to this religion. There was also a small minority of followers of Iranian religions in Arabia, such as Zoroastrianism, Mazdakism, and others, which spread under Persian influence. As I mentioned earlier that in the pre-Islamic period, Arab statehood was a relatively rare phenomenon, since Arabia constantly shifted from tribal anarchy to fragile states and back again. However, in the pre-Islamic period, there were a number of notable states in Arabia, mentioned in Greek, Roman, Mesopotamian, and Persian sources, as well as in oral Arab traditions, which were later recorded by Islamic scholars. According to classical Arab writers, Arabs were divided into Qatanites, southern Arabs who descended from Qatan, and northern Arabs who descended from Adnan. Interestingly, these two groups had certain differences, including the presence of statehood and political systems among them. In South Arabia, there were more established states, and all of them were governed as monarchies. In the north, the more common form of statehood was free tribal confederations, or essentially city-states, such as Mecca. Such states were governed by an oligarchy and aristocracy. The south was considered more developed, since the main trade route of Arabia passed through it before Mecca emerged as an alternative, and also because of a higher degree of contact with outsiders, such as the Ethiopians. Starting from the 4th century, a reverse process began, when many southern tribes migrated north and came under northern influence. The South Arabian script disappeared, while the North Arabian script became widespread in Arabia. A tribe, or a union of tribes. Thamud was one of the first recorded states in Arabia, which, according to Assyrian sources, dating back to the 8th century BC, held a prominent position in northwestern Arabia. And later, according to Roman sources, it was used by the Roman Empire as an auxiliary force. In the 3rd century BC, the Greek scholar Eratosthenes mentioned the Manians, Sabians, Katabanians, and Hadramites as the main peoples inhabiting the Arabian Peninsula. Historians mention the existence of an independent Sabaean kingdom on the territory of modern Yemen, which was conquered by the Himyarite kingdom around 280 AD. The Himyarite kingdom was one of the most prominent pre-Islamic states of Arabia, ruled by a monarch. But in practice, the power of the state was shared with regional rulers who had a high degree of autonomy, which resembled the European kingdoms of the medieval era. By the beginning of the 4th century AD, the Himyarite kingdom dominated southern Arabia and expanded northward to Najran. Originally polytheistic, the Himyarites became monotheists around the 4th century with a belief in the Abrahamic God. At the end of the 4th century, the Himyarite king Abu Karib adopted Judaism as his faith. Another king, Dunuwas Yusuf, showed even greater zeal by starting to persecute Christians living in the kingdom. This became the downfall of the Himyarite dynasty, as Dunuwas was either killed or committed suicide after being defeated in 524 by a Christian coalition that included the Ethiopian kingdom of Aksum, the Byzantine Empire, and the South Arabian Christians. After that, the Christian Ethiopians established control over South Arabia, built a church in Sana'a, and tried to attract pilgrims, and therefore trade, to Sana'a instead of Mecca. This led to a conflict between the Ethiopian governor in Yemen, Abraha, and Mecca, which is mentioned in the Quran. Apparently, Abraha used war elephants against Mecca, but he did not succeed and was forced to turn back. The second half of the 6th century was marked by a power struggle between the Ethiopians and the Sasanians for control over the remnants of the Himyarite kingdom in which the Persian Empire prevailed. Another notable pre-Islamic state in Arabia was the Kingdom of Kinda, the first historically recorded state in Central Arabia, which emerged at the end of the 5th century. The Kingdom of Kinda carried out a series of successful raids on Byzantine territories in northern Arabia. But similar attempts against the Sassanid Empire were unsuccessful. In 529, the Lakhmid vassals of the Persians defeated and killed the Kindan king Al-Harith ibn Amr, which led to the decline of this state. The aforementioned Lakhmid kingdom was founded in eastern Arabia by the Banu Lakham tribe around the 3rd or 4th century. Initially, the independent Lakhmids threatened the coastal cities of the Sassanid Empire, and in 325 the Sassanid king Shapur II launched a campaign against them. Soon, the Lakhmid capital of Hira came under the control of the Sassanids. From then on, the Lakhmid kingdom became a vassal of the Sassanid Empire, and at the beginning of the 7th century it was annexed by them. The Ghassanid kingdom met a similar fate. Around the 3rd century AD, a part of the Azd tribe migrated from Yemen to the Levant and founded the Ghassanid kingdom as a vassal of the Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Jabiyah. The Ghassanid kingdom ceased to exist during the early Islamic expansion. However, none of these kingdoms was powerful or centralized enough to unite the Arabs into a single state and protect it from foreign invasions. Most of Arabia was governed by the unwritten rules of Bedouin society, which led to wars and despair against the backdrop of already harsh living conditions. Pre-Islamic Arabs may have shared a similar language and traditions, but they were divided by tribal affiliation, blood feuds, and religion. But, obviously, soon Arabia and other countries would be transformed as a result of the momentous process of the rise of Islam and the creation of a unified Arab state. If you're interested in the topic of the early Arab conquests that followed the emergence of Islam, then let me know in the comments. And if there's a lot of interest, we'll definitely make a follow-up. Well, that's all from me for now. See you in the next episode. Bye.